button so that you know that. This seminar, the three parts of the seminar, which today and tomorrow, and then the weekend after, will all find itself on our YouTube channel eventually. But we recorded it and then it's freely accessible to people after the seminar. So welcome. I'm glad that you are here today. We actually have 34 students, faculty, graduate students registered. But because of the nature of how this is structured, people kind of come in and out and so forth. I've got one colleague who emailed me this morning and said she won't be here today, but she'll be here tomorrow. Hopefully the students will come in and out, particularly tomorrow, because we have a career talk tomorrow about the field also, that they'll come tomorrow. I am letting people in. That's my job. So you'll hear little clicks as I let people in. So this is our 10th annual National Community College Virtual Peacebuilding Seminar. We will be holding it. You all see my slides. You should be able to see them. And this is today's agenda and who is going to be talking with us today and tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Layla, Sarah, Srin, and Paul today, and then Tyler, Heather, and Nanette tomorrow. So that's tomorrow's program. And then these are the programs for the following weekend, who's speaking the following weekend, and then the final weekend, so that you know what's coming up every week. You received links from Priscilla, and those links you should cache somewhere or hold somewhere. If you don't get a link, then just email Priscilla or email me, and we will make sure that you get a link. I did want to do some housekeeping before we start. People are joining us. All sessions are being recorded and will be archived in the Forage Center's YouTube channel after the program. We are also creating a live transcript. I've hit that button also, which I will do momentarily. We're having a live transcript of it also. So in the event that people want the transcript afterwards. We are using Zoom meetings, which allows for interaction between attendees. So when you go in the Zoom, you usually use webinar or you will use meetings. We're using meetings because you are encouraged to network. It provides more interaction between individuals. So I'm asking people in the chat if they can do is introduce their name by themselves, by their name, their institution or their organization, their location. Is always nice to know where people are physically, contact information, interests. You don't have to keep your camera on, but it's helpful to presenters. Studies show that if presenters can actually see somebody physically, even Zoom, it improves what they do. If it's just a lot of black screens, it doesn't kind of create the interaction that we want to create. So, but it's really up to you. Keep yourself muted unless you are speaking. You should use your name tags and make sure your name tag's correct, and consider using your pronouns. So if you don't have your pronouns in there, that's helpful in identifying, particularly when people would call or refer to you. You've received links to all 3 weekends. If not, contact Priscilla Briones, and that's her email. Each session is 45 minutes with an additional 15-minute allocated for Q&A or break at the end. So the first session will start at 1:15 or 12:15 Eastern time. We'll go for 45 minutes, and then we'll have another 15 minutes before the next one starts. During Q&A, we're going to ask you to use hand raising, and you will be called on. And I'm the one who calls on it because I'm the one who is kind of handling all of that. What I wanted to do, though, is before we start officially, is to talk a little bit about the Forage Center, tell you a bit of the work of the Forage Center, what the Forage Center does, and so that you understand kind of the sponsor of this, or the co-sponsor of this for that matter. So the Forage Center, of which I'm the president, is a 501c3 corporation. It engaged in humanitarian and peacebuilding experiential training and education. We focus on preparing individuals for careers in field work, including Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, but a lot of our students actually want to work overseas in conflict zones, but also domestic work. So a lot of people want to do domestic humanitarian work. We were formed in 2015, and then we hold training in Western Maryland. We have a site. we do a lot of work virtually, as we've been doing for the last couple of years, and it's at locations across the US. Though we primarily work with graduate students, we have worked with undergraduates, including community college students. I've done quite 3 or 4 programs with Allegheny College of Maryland, for instance, which is a community college in Western Maryland. This is a photograph from our program with graduate students from George Mason, American University, University of Massachusetts, that was held last June. These are just photographs from recent programs we've had, just to give you a sense of what the Forage Center does. Our training is very field-based, it's role-play based. Most importantly, is experiential based, in that people are in role during the entire period that they're in the simulation. Other programs we've done. We've also done some virtual programs also. We did a program in June in Western Maryland, and then we did a program last October, a year ago, which was our first face-to-face program, which we did at Arcadia University, Philadelphia. The first face-to-face program we've done in 2 years. So, and then later on today, if you're interested, the Forage Center at 4 o'clock Eastern is sponsoring. We hold Forage Center conversations on a monthly basis. This is with Alexandria Aurora, who works for Refugee Services of Texas. And she is going to talk about domestic humanitarian work. So her experiences, she's also a student in the master's degree in humanitarian assistance at the University of San Diego. So she's going to talk about that program also. So let's talk about this seminar for a minute before we launch off. This is the 10th seminar we've had, so I do want to bring that to your attention. Often when we're kind of thinking about years, you know, when you get to 10, you're supposed to toast or do something or have some sort of event, and at least I want to maybe go through a few slides and kind of recap a little bit, but not too much. So we actually started the seminar in 2013 in Montgomery College. Then from 2014 to 2017, it was at Northern Virginia Community College, then 2 years at George Mason, and then in 2020 we went virtual. So this is the 3rd year we've done the virtual version, strictly virtual. Whether we go back to face-to-face is, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, because I have found that by having a virtual seminar, we are really able to do a lot and allow people to participate who wouldn't physically come to Washington. We've had over 150 faculty and students in those 10 years from 75 different academic institutions. Okay. These are just some photographs from past seminars. These were our first face-to-face. Darren Cambridge. He's not coming this year. He wasn't able to, but he often would give a talk on pedagogy. This is from, I think, the last seminar we did at George Mason University, just to show you some, when we were doing it face-to-face, we go out to dinner. That's not so easy now that we're in the virtual space. This was our visit to the U.S. Diplomacy Museum, which is part of the State Department. Once again, not so easy to do in the virtual space, but hopefully maybe we can get back to it. And a place I would encourage you to go if you're in Washington. We would go to the U.S. Institute of Peace. We've had briefings from USIP. We're not having one this year, but we had one, I think, 2 years back, and probably want to integrate that again in the future. Jeff Helsing was giving a briefing. Coleman McCarthy. So those of you who come with us every year, Coleman McCarthy was always participating. Coleman is not a Zoom person, kind of. It's not his thing. So I'm hoping that when we go back face-to-face, we'll be able to bring Coleman back. This is actually a photograph from our first seminar in 2013 when we held it at Montgomery College. And that was, this is the last day of the seminar where we visited the American Red Cross downtown. And actually, there's at least one person that photograph is with us today. Tulin, I don't know if you see yourself in that photograph there. This is when we visited the U.S. Institute of Peace in 2014. This was the last year we held the program at Nova at Northern Virginia Community College. It's a visit to the Lincoln Memorial. When we were doing it face-to-face, we would the last couple of years include a tour of the monuments, the peace monuments, and going to Lincoln Memorial. I don't know if some of you know this, that the work that this actually comes from the work when I was at the U.S. Institute of Peace. So when we started the seminar in 2013, I directed a similar seminar for 4 years at USIP in the mid 2000s. And that's where I met people like Shireen Khosrapur and other people who come to that seminar. And a lot of the work actually came from a book that I wrote that's now 10 years, was published in 2013 on peacebuilding in community colleges. So questions before we get started, and then I introduce our first group. This is a very informal event. I am going to remind people to keep themselves muted unless they're asking questions. I'm going to leave it to the presenters to decide. Well, they have 15 minutes at the end, or they can take questions at any time. But I am going to be the moderator to call on people. Really, it's best that you ask your question. We are such a small group. There's no reason that you just can't ask it. If you prefer to put it in the chat, that's fine also. So any questions at this point? Like if you've got a question, just kind of raise your hand. No questions. Okay. All right. Okay. Away we go. All right. So let me end my show and put that away. Stop sharing. And let me do a little bit of introduction of our first team who's going to speak. And so we're really pleased today to have, to start us off, three, good colleagues, dear colleagues, especially Shireen Khosrapur, who I've known for years, from Austin Community College. So I just want to say a little bit about themselves, and then not to take their time. It's often best to do short introductions to let people talk about themselves. So Shireen is the director of the Peace and Conflict Studies Center at ACC, Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. She's also a professor of psychology. She holds a bachelor's and PhD from the University of Texas. She's earned certificates in global conflict analysis, humanitarian law from the Johns Hopkins Bologna Institute for Peace and Security. She's been awarded a lot of several teaching and leadership awards. Layla, I'm not going to be able to pronounce your name because I know I'm going to mess it up. Let me try Taragai.
I usually say Taragi. It's
Taragi. Well,
yeah.
Whatever you usually say is what I should say, because that's how you pronounce it. Taragi is the program coordinator for the Center in Peace and Conflict Studies at ACC. Previously, she worked for Refugee Services of Texas. She has a master's in public affairs from the University of Texas, a master's in political science, University of Arkansas, and a bachelor's degree from the University of Oregon. And then finally, Sarah Lynn Bowman is currently an associate professor of the Department of Game Design at Uppsala University in Sweden. And we were emailing before because I gave a lecture there about 20 years ago, where she teaches a certificate track on the use of role-playing games as vehicles for personal social change. She's also an adjunct faculty member at ACC. She received her PhD from the University of Texas at Dallas, and she also holds a BA and a master's degree from the University of Texas at Austin. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the team. You should be able to share your screen if that's what you want to do, and open your mics. I'm going to ask everybody, including myself.
David, we lost your sound, but
yeah, I'm back on. I just wanted to say that I can see it is what I'm saying, and then I'm going to mute myself.
Okay.
All right.
I also just wanted to note that I'm having some lag, so I'm going to try to log in through my phone as well.
Okay. It looks great, Layla. I can see the
Great.
presenter's view.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, David, for the introductions. You've taken a little bit of my piece of the presentation off my shoulders, which I'm grateful for you for doing that, for the kind words of welcome. So everyone, we are so glad that you're here, and we are planning to talk with you today about LARP and how we use it in our conflict transformation workshops. And for those of you who are not familiar, LARP is an acronym and it stands for Live Action Role Playing. And oops, why is it? Oh, there we go. So as David stated, I am Layla. I'm here with Sarah and Shireen, and we're delighted to be with you today. So to give you an introduction to the work that we are doing, we offer a Conflict Transformation Academy, which is a workshop series, and we offer it in 2 levels. Level 1 and level 2 are both designed for faculty and staff primarily. We've occasionally included some students, and we are considering offering a continuing education version of this training to folks that are not full-time students at ACC or staff or faculty, but that's another matter. But basically at level 1, we are introducing faculty and staff to high-level theory about conflict transformation. But in each meeting that we have, we try and focus on exercising 1 to 3 skills that we would like them to practice or discuss. On the whole, the kind of conflicts that we work with throughout the academy include conflict styles, positions and interests, emotions and needs. We practice reflective listening and using I statements. We explore the different types of power, different types of violence. We work on identifying isms, different types of isms that exist in our society, and examine the way that our different individual identities intersect with those isms. We look at worldview, culture. We practice perception checking, and we explore cognitive dissonance as well. And then in level 2, we continue to work with all of those concepts, but in a more applied way, where we're asking folks to practice the skills and concepts they learned about in level 1, but in more depth through role playing around college-based conflict scenarios. And this provides, these scenarios provide a basic situation and, a set of characters that participants can quickly embody. So they're not too complicated. We try and keep it pretty straightforward. And our participants get to use these embodied experiences as a springboard for debrief and reflection. And this allows the participants to practice different ways of experiencing and responding to conflict. We find that this is a really powerful opportunity for them to develop some agency around how they respond to conflict. They get to discover that they have choices in conflict situations and get practice exercising those choices and the different tools that we've given them to try and transform conflict. And there's a lot of practice, and we believe that's so important, that practice makes competent. And we talk a lot about how initially you're going to move from awkward engagement, and with more practice, develop more facility with the skill set that we're sharing. And at this point, I am going to turn things over to my colleague Shireen to talk to you a little bit more about why role playing in this capacity.
All right. Thank you, Layla. So just a little bit more about why we role play, what we found are the benefits of role play. And there is a lot of scholarship on the role of role play in helping people grow as well. So this isn't just from our own experiences. And then I want to promise that you will actually get to see a role play. So it's not just talk about it. Okay, so role playing provides opportunities for one, to experience being in conflict from a first person perspective. Compared to looking at case studies and trainings, in role play, you're more likely to actually identify with the role and access and feel the emotions that tend to come up in conflict in a surprisingly short play scenario. In less than 2 minutes, people start feeling the emotions. And then you can see how you might actually behave in a conflict that's about you. But role play, number 2, allows us some narrative distance. Because while we're experiencing conflict in the moment, because in role play, the presenters, the facilitators provide a fictional conflict, the character in the narrative gives us some personal distance. So it seems to be like the best of both worlds. We also have some more opportunities for empathy cultivation. It's more difficult to consider or know how another person's experience, to know another person's experience while we are in a conflict that's our own, because, you know, our emotional engagement, you know, may turn off the thinking part of our brain and kind of can be very self-focused. But in a role play, we have an opportunity to practice really viewing other people's perspectives. We have that distance allows us to do that. And then theory of mind through perspective taking. For those of you who are not familiar with theory of mind, in psychology, theory of mind is the ability to understand other people by considering what's happening in their mind. For example, knowing that other people's mental states, including their needs, their beliefs, their emotions, and perceptions may be different from your own. And role play facilitates the capacity for theory of mind through this perspective taking. Role play also helps us understand ourselves better. It's really powerful to see yourself in a fictional conflict and get a better sense of what issues tend to come up for you in a conflict. How do you tend to feel in a conflict and respond? Next slide, Leila, please. And this is just a summary of what we've found role play being great for. We've already talked about all of them, but we just wanted to put them on a slide in case you was helpful to you. Role play gives us, it's good for feeling agency, practicing the skills you're learning so that you develop some competence, having those personal embodied experiences, plus the reflection that comes with the debriefing that you'll see Sarah lead us through, is really powerful for learning. And at the same time, giving us some personal distance because the conflict is fictional. It's also really fun for everybody involved. Each scenario takes us, someone explains the scene, assigns roles and names. You use a fictional name in the role play. There are hot seat questions that Sarah will demonstrate for us soon. And then you play the scene, and then we end by debriefing. That's a really important step in learning. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now.
All right, hopefully I won't, hopefully it'll be okay with the sound. And are you hearing an echo?
No,
No?
no echo, no.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about bleed. In role-playing studies, we have this term called bleed, and we have bleed out and bleed in. And this is when emotions, thoughts, relationship states, and physical states spill over from real life to the fiction and vice versa. So we're about to have a scenario, and the goal is to have emotions, right? And to be able to locate them in our bodies. So this is totally normal and even desirable in role playing. Learning how to sit in the discomfort is actually the goal, and not try to solve the problem too quickly, which a lot of us who are interested in this kind of work may have a tendency to do. We want that tension to remain high in these scenes rather than de-escalating them immediately, because we're practicing how to respond when we may be emotionally activated or overwhelmed, which, as we know, is quite difficult. However, when we do experience bleed, it needs to be processed. And that's why, as Shireen was saying, the debrief is such an important step. Next slide, please. So what is challenging about using role-playing in this particular context? As a facilitator, I'm trying to develop the appropriate and assisting participants to embody the role. We have this hot seat technique that I will show you in a little while to guide people in, but that can be a little challenging knowing what questions to ask, for example. Asking participants to monologue, which is to share their character's inner thoughts. So you have to kind of know when to ask for a monologue. Know when to cut the scene, keeping the tension high. So not letting the scene dwindle down. So there's a little bit of calibration needed there. Often served by non-participants, that can be really potent. And learning to be non-judgmental in the debrief can be a little bit difficult at times. And really keeping participants feeling safe. We can't ensure safety, but we can create an environment where hopefully they feel safe. And but also maintaining that balance between that discomfort and safety. So we don't want so that they don't actually sit in the discomfort. And so you may need to build in safeguards to take care of people who are experiencing emotional bleed. Like you might have a safety person there. We sometimes join and just sit in the main room just in case people need that. Next slide, please. And what is challenging as a participant? Awkward engagement is to be expected. And so that awkwardness can sometimes make it hard for people to feel like they can play. But actually, we found that they get over that pretty quickly. They really dive into it, which is really nice to see. People don't naturally enjoy sitting in their discomfort, but that is the place that helps us grow. And sometimes there's power differentials that are in the group, and those can impact our comfort levels with role play. So if someone's supervisor is in the same room, they may not feel comfortable role playing around power. Bleed can happen really fast, and participants can get very emotional very quickly, which can sometimes take over the session. So again, having those safeguards. And reminding participants that we are all here to help each other collaboratively in these scenes, even though we're playing out conflict. So let's support each other in the process. So the characters can be in conflict while the players are supporting each other. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to do a little demo here with Layla and Shireen. And again, we're going to assign roles, and we're going to use the hot seat. We're going to start the scene. I'm going to cut when the tension is high, and then we'll have a debrief. And so this scenario is called I Can't Concentrate. Staff member A has trouble getting their work done when staff member B chats in the office about random topics. Staff member A is confronting them about this issue. So Layla, are you comfortable playing staff member A?
I am. I will warn you, I've had some difficulty accessing the chat while sharing my screen on my laptop this morning, so I won't be able to type my name into the chat, but I can tell you what my character is.
What is the name of your character?
My character's name is Krista.
Krista. Okay, let me type it in so I can reference it. And Shireen, are you comfortable playing staff member B?
Yes.
And what is your character's name?
Nilu.
Can you type it in the chat, please?
Yes.
Nilu, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm about to start the scene. Oh, I'm going to start the hot seat. So kind of try to think about your characters and where they're coming from. And also if you could put your pronouns in the chat. Layla, which pronouns is your character using?
She, her.
Okay, and Shireen as well. Thank you so much. And so Krista, what important project have you been trying to get out the door that is really difficult for you to do when there's talking in the office?
Well, I mean, I'm juggling several things right now. Like we have several events and we record those events, and then I need to add captions to them and get them posted and sent to people who attended or who will want to watch it in the future. I'm planning this annual symposium in the spring. I'm also working to build the Blackboard environment for our Conflict Transformation Academy, which is getting started soon. So I just have a lot of things I'm juggling and trying to switch back and forth between, and can get pretty overwhelming sometimes.
And Krista, what do you think would make your life better if Nilu and the other people in the office could try to adapt?
I mean, I think it would just be really helpful if we could try to make sure that like most of our collegial socializing happened during like lunch and breaks, and that like when we're, you know, at work in our workspace, our dedicated workspace, that we could try and keep the crosstalk to a minimum. Like, I mean, I understand sometimes we need to talk to each other about work, but for me, I have attention deficit disorder. I can easily get derailed or pulled in a direction that I shouldn't be focusing on. And with all these urgent tasks, like I just worry that I'm going to miss the mark, like, or not deliver on some of my deliverables and end up in trouble because like I'm being pulled into non-work related conversations all the time.
Thank you. Nilu, why is it so important for you to chat with your colleagues?
Well, because I'm a human. I mean, I can't be expected to work like a robot. It's like at this time, lunch is over and we turn off your human part and now you're just a worker. We're whole people all the time. And it's unnatural for a group of people to sit together for, 2 hours at a time and not be themselves. It makes my work more enjoyable. It makes the time go. It makes me more productive when I feel like I am my whole person. And so are my colleagues. I just think it's unnatural to not talk about anything but work.
And what was the most fun conversation you've had recently with your colleagues?
I don't know. People were talking about how they're dressing up for Halloween. One of my colleagues has 4 different costumes because she's going to 4 different events, and was kind of fun. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to start the scene as the supervisor, and then Krista will confront Nilu about this issue. Remember, the lunch break ends in 5 minutes, so everybody, let's try to get back to work.
Hey, Nilu, do you have a few minutes to chat really quick before we go back to our work?
Yeah, sure. I always love talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I enjoy talking to you too. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way. But I've been really stressed out lately. I have so much work on my plate, and I have trouble concentrating in general. But like during this very hectic time, it would be so helpful if we could try to come to an understanding in which like we try and minimize like non-work related conversations in our shared office space, like, and reserve most of our socializing for like our breaks or our lunch or other times. I'm asking you this, not to like be a downer. I'm just like really stressed.
Well, I'm sorry, but Krista, this was already a downer. I didn't know you were so upset with me. I mean, I'm not the only one talking. And I don't know, when you say keep it to a minimum, what is minimum? You want to define that for me? I mean, it's going to be hard to sit for 2 hours, waiting for the 15-minute break, which, people just run to the bathroom and get, a refill on their coffee or tea and then come back. So basically, we won't get a chance to talk to each other at all until lunchtime. And that just doesn't seem normal to me. I don't like that. I'm sorry you're feeling overwhelmed with the conversations. But I don't know, that would completely change my work experience. And I'd probably get
Let's go
depressed.
ahead and cut. Just to make sure we have time for the next scene. Krista, what do you feel in your body during this scene?
Discomfort. I felt a fair amount of nervous apprehension, even like sharing my concerns with Nilu. And I had like some anxiousness in my chest, and like some tingly sensations in my limbs. But, and I'm definitely struggling. Like, I'm grateful for this pause because I'm not sure what I want to say to Nilu next. Because she really doesn't seem to want to bother to empathize with where I'm coming from. Yeah.
And which of the 5 human needs would you say you feel was threatened during the scene? Power, fun, freedom, security, or belonging?
I'd say first and foremost, like I'm more preoccupied with security. I feel like my job security is at risk if I can't get my work done. And lacking a private space to like focus on my work, like I'm kind of at the mercy of others to a certain extent here. But like obviously it was not a conversation I necessarily wanted to have either. And I know that now, like, my sense of belonging is kind of hanging in the balance. And I'm sure maybe that's true for Nilu too, because she clearly, for her, belonging means being able to talk as much as you want about whatever you want, whenever you want. But yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was almost good perception check. Nilu, what were you feeling in your body during this scene?
Oh, it's so sad. Yeah, it was like my heart sank into the pit of my stomach, because my expectations were raised when Krista said, "Do you have time to talk?" I thought, oh, she's feeling really close to me. She wants to share something privately with me, and she did, but it was, telling me how bad I am and how I'm just making work impossible for her. And that really was so different from how I imagined our relationship and how I imagined I was viewed at work, that it just was a shocker. I just couldn't think past that, really. I don't think I could really listen to much more after that.
And which of the 5 human needs would you feel were threatened in this scene? Power, fun, freedom, security, or belonging?
Probably all of them. The power to be myself. Definitely not fun to not talk and just work. The freedom to do what I find normally like a normal thing, and security, because also my work, if this work becomes really hard for me, I may not be able to keep it. I may need to look for another job. And certainly belonging, like I thought I belonged, but I guess at least from Krista's point of view, I don't.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, both of you. And if we could advance to the next slide. So if you notice, we debriefed still a little bit in character so that they could still hold that perspective. So we'll do a little bit of in character debrief, but then we'll have a larger debrief afterwards. So do I have any volunteers who would like to play student A or student B? I can read the scenario first so that you can decide. And
Layla,
just
can I
remember that
say
you're
something first?
sure.
There are a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is that we don't jump into role play, as Layla already mentioned, like when the group is new, when people don't know each other. We wait until we've kind of created a community, so there's a little bit more trust. And so people are free to kind of be as, not nice as I was. And secondly, that there's this tension between really using all of the skills you have and also being a little bit difficult in the scenario with your character. So I just wanted to say to people that you can play it. You won't be judged if you're not a nice person, just like I wasn't a nice person.
Okay, yeah. So even though you're going to be playing a character that's different than yourself, like perhaps being not nice, that person may or may not have your conflict transformation skills, but they're activated in this moment. So allow the scene to escalate. Because remember, we're not trying to resolve it immediately. We're trying to actually get into that heightened state of emotion so we can actually identify these things. We could talk all day about the high level theory, but in practice, it can be really difficult. So this scenario is called There Is No I in Team. 2 students are assigned to a team to put together a class project. Student A has been doing the majority of the work and confronts student B at their next group meeting. Who would like to play student A?
I can.
That would be great. Thank you, Lena. Can you put your character's name in the chat and their pronouns? And in the meantime, if someone would like to volunteer to be student B.
I can do it.
Great. Thank you, Ty. Can you put your character's name and pronouns in the chat? And Lena, the character's name is Wally. Is that correct? Great. And Ty also, yeah, great. So Ty is playing Chase. All right. So Wally, what has been frustrating you so much about this group project?
Just like every project, I end up doing all the work and my partners take all the credit.
How does that make you feel?
Like I'm being dumped on, like I have to do all the hard work and I have to do it all by myself. There's no help.
You mentioned this has happened before. Can you think of a memory in the past where this has been particularly painful?
Yeah, I had a couple semesters ago, I was working on a project and I was the only one doing it and the deadline was getting close and people had promised to do everything. And then I had to end up giving up everything that weekend in order to get it finished, submitted it, and everybody got the same grade.
Thank you. And Chase, what's been difficult about working on this project for you?
Well, I mean, a lot. I know we're coming out of COVID, but it's still having an impact in my life. I've had sick family members that I've been caring for, and I have a full class load and I work part-time, and it's just like hard to manage everything. And I'm not trying to take all the credit for Wally's like work. I recognize that she's, putting in the majority of the effort. It's just hard to, it's hard to manage everything. And I feel stressed, and I don't know, like I wish I could do more, but it's just a lot.
Yeah, I can understand that. And what has this been a problem for you in the past, in other experiences?
Like that, I don't take as much responsibility on. Is that the question?
Sure, if that's how you're interpreting it.
Well, not as much as like in the last couple of semesters. It's been especially stressful, and I've just been stretched so thin. I feel exhausted, and I mean, like Wally has seems to have more time, and is like motivated to like get things done quickly. And for me, like because of my schedule and the commitments and caring for my family, it's hard to prioritize a project as quickly as other people want to prioritize it. Like I get my stuff done, but sometimes it's last minute, a late night before it's due. And I hate group projects, especially during COVID.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to play the teacher, and I'm going to start the scene, and then Wally will confront Chase about this issue. Okay, class, you have 30 minutes to go over your research project together in your group, so go ahead and start now.
Jace, how are we going to get this? How are we going to get this done? Because I mean, we only have 30 minutes, and most of the work that you promised to get done hasn't been done. I tried to take up the slack for you, but now we're in a pickle.
Yeah, I know. I feel bad that I haven't been able to get my part done as quickly as I had planned. I know I know it's a lot on you. And I appreciate the effort you've put in. I'm so stressed out, Wally. I'm so stressed out. I don't know. What do you recommend?
Chase, we're all stressed out. It's not just you. We all have issues. We all have family. I got a lot on my plate as well. We got to get this done. So should I just finish it?
Well, I mean, maybe there's a smaller chunk that I could take. I already started working on one aspect of it. Section 3 from the outline. And I'd be willing to like finish that, but I know that there's like section 4 and 7 that are still not done that I said I would do. I feel bad, but I just, if you're willing, that would be really helpful, Wally.
Well, the problem is I can do 4, but if you haven't finished 3, how am I going to even, what am I going to base 4 on? So I'll just do it all. Okay. But this is just ridiculous.
And cut. Great. Wally.
Chase, I'm so sorry.
No, not yet. Wally, what did it feel in your body when you were playing that scene?
Anger, frustration.
And where did you locate that in your body?
Probably in my stomach, and feeling like that's hard to describe, but I would probably say my stomach, like filling with air.
And which of the 5 human needs would you say might have felt threatened in this scene? Power, fun, freedom, security, or belonging?
guess belonging, because you want to feel like you're part of a group. And when you have to, and then you feel like you're doing it all, then you feel like, okay, it's all on me. I'm all alone in this.
Thank you. And Chase, what did you feel during this confrontation?
I felt guilty. I felt sorry. I felt like I had let another person down. And that was not, what I had intended. Yeah.
And which of the 5 human needs would you say felt threatened? So fun, freedom, power, security, or belonging?
Yeah, I think what was really showing up for me was the power. I felt powerless. I felt powerless. I felt a little out of control. Like I couldn't control everything that was going on, both with the project, but then also I felt like Wally was walking all over me and like wanted to get stuff done, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to respond to her questions.
Can we advance to the next slide, please? So this is a question for the whole group, but of course the people who are in the scene are welcome to answer as well. You can answer, what did you notice about this scene, or what did it make you think about? Let's start with that. So either something you observed or something that it called to mind for you.
Just go ahead and open your mics. Let's just do it like that because it's a small group.
I feel, and love to hear if other people felt this way, that the belonging is almost the most important in a conflict, that everyone is feeling like by having this conflict, I'm either pushing myself out or I'm pushing someone else out. And that feeling of being kicked out of the community is like the most horrific thing.
Absolutely.
This is Thomas.
Because that actually then ties into security, right?
Yeah, this is Thomas. First I want to say you guys did a great job. It was very realistic. I think the belonging is a sense of what you guys showed, how difficult it is to meet certain needs or to commit because of our own personal because our needs don't always intersect. And so I don't think you guys got, well, I mean, the characters didn't get to the point of understanding why they're having this conflict. And I think if they were able to dive deeper, I think they will be able to have a better understanding and come up with probably more feasible solutions. It will still surface. And I can understand why the comments, because that's something I can relate to in college or just in life. You're not going to always satisfy people. However, people are not going to always meet your expectations too. So, yeah, those are the things that come to mind.
Thank you so much. John?
Yeah, I found it interesting with all the human needs that they seem to be very intersected for me, that I often choose the wrong one. When someone says, oh, it's this particular need, I said, oh, I didn't see that when the person argues it, but I really don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And I found that very, very interesting. Cross section of what, whether it's security or whether it's fun at work, or I can understand that the guilt feelings, the anxiety about not contributing and things like that. So I found that very interesting, how there's an intersection for me, at least.
Absolutely. These are not discrete things necessarily, but it kind of helps people give language to something they might be sensing in themselves that otherwise wouldn't maybe have a name. So they're kind of convenient categories, but they certainly don't cover the whole length of human experience, right? Ty?
Yeah, I mean, what did I notice about this scene? I had like flashbacks to classes I've taught over the last couple of years, where, you know, group projects are always a component of, right? And I think as the person that was the slacker in this case, right? It gave me a deeper sense of empathy of like, I felt like I was a deer in the headlights. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to move forward. And it just, you know, I think cognitively, like I've been aware of that experience among some of my students that have been in that almost exact position in group projects. But I think actually experiencing it, you know, gave me a deeper, you know, level of empathy towards what they're going through and what they're feeling, and that inability to even problem solve and figure out how to move forward. In that moment, I felt like no matter what we did moving forward, it wasn't going to feel good for me, right? So.
Mhm. Thank you so much. David.
Yeah, like Ty, over the years, I mean, I guess most every class I give students, we used to call it cooperative learning, but we all say group projects where they're working together. And I kind of say, well, there you go. Here are some things to think about. And it happens, comes back miraculously done, right? And I mean, occasionally students will come to me, but usually they've just got to figure it out. And this is like telling me, are they really figuring it out? And it then leads me to think of what should I be minding that relationship more, right? I don't know, but it is getting me to think about that, right? I mean, the dynamics are things that I'm not seeing necessarily. So I have to think about how I should continue to operate doing group projects with students.
Mm-hmm. And we're running a little low on time. So if people want to put like one takeaway in the chat that they got from witnessing that, it would be really cool, especially things that you might be able to
you can go a few minutes, Sarah, you can go a few minutes because we'll just kind of transition to questions. If people want to get up and walk around and take a break, because we'll have a new session at 1:15. So if you want to keep.
We have a couple more slides that we wanted to get
Oh,
through.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It did
if you
look like
can put
Lena
takeaways
wanted-
in the chat, and just remember, bleed is totally normal if you're experiencing that. Can you move on to the next slide, please?
Sure.
And I think this is Shireen.
Yeah, before we open to questions, I just wanted to share some feedback from our previous participants about role play. Role playing is immensely useful in understanding other perspectives, as you all pointed out too, actually, and understanding conflict styles, which we didn't work with today, but we build up to the role play in our workshops. I didn't think I'd be into role play, but it was actually fun. A lot of people are kind of scared of role play, but they find it fun. And role playing was tough, but useful. And I think that's the end of our prepared presentation. But we do want to take your questions and comments about all of this.
Yeah, and like I said, go ahead and ask the questions. If you want to raise your hands, I'll call on you. We are going to transition to another presentation at 1:15.
If it's okay, I'm
questions?
gonna stop sharing the screen so I can see the chat.
Any questions? Lena, you put something in the chat. Maybe you wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting that I think I'm a solution-oriented person. And I wanted to like jump in, especially when Chase was like, well, what do you suggest? I thought that was a brilliant answer, right? Put it back on me. So you're almost saying, hey, you deserve to decide. So I'll let I thought that was really good, but because I wasn't allowed to do that, I was forced to focus on the emotions, which I thought is really interesting, because I think I often get the emotions muddled with let's solve it right away.
Yeah, and I think that for me at least is a compulsion. Like I want to solve and fix things so that I can manage other people's discomfort. And once I kind of realize that about myself, I still do it, by the way. I have to check in and say, what if I could just be with their discomfort? Would that help them more in this situation? Sometimes the answer is no. Maybe they do need assistance in that moment, but a lot of times people just need to feel heard, I find.
Mhm.
You know, in many respects, that it's from our societal hesitancy to deal with emotions, right? We just don't want to go there, right? And we just want to manage it and move on to the next thing, right? And that's hard. And I wonder if that's a cultural thing. Is it a gender thing? Is it a teacher-student thing? I don't know, but it's hard.
Yeah, I've been actually looking at national culture, culture that's
Mm.
part of, and the US is very, that's part of the masculine culture.
Mm.
The US has a very highly masculine culture, and that's like brings us to get to the point, problem solve, and move on, as opposed to a more feminine cultures that many of parts of the world have, which is let's take care of people first. Like, how are people feeling? Yeah.
Any questions about the use of this pedagogy?
Any other thoughts?
Well, I do have something that comes to mind when it comes to conflict. Something I'm noticing, I think there's a fear, particularly in role plays, in a sense, there's a fear that people don't like the stigma of the conflict attached to them as the individual. You know, we tend to have a hard time separating the person from the problem. And that's why I think a lot of times, even I have to assess all parameters regarding on me, who am I engaging with, sharing information, what would be their response regarding their intent, is it to use it against me and all that, because sometimes people can be vindictive, even unfortunately, even in our field, I've ran across that. So I think there's that fear of, can I say weaponize? I don't know.
Mhm.
People use information intentionally for a negative outcome, and that's always a fear a lot of people have, and that's why there's that disconnect, hesitance of people wanting to go through these type of processes. I think that's like that's a historical thing, as something you mentioned. Is it Sharon? I'm sorry. You were talking about the masculinity in this country. That's historic. That's culture. That's I'm gonna end on this. That's embedded in the American culture, which is part of the identity of individuals within that culture. And to change that means you're asking somebody to change who they are or how they identify themselves. And that's a whole different conversation, just like you, in comparison to other countries. The reason why there's that national conflict is because people are asking other people to change who they are, which is entrenched into the values within that country, and it gets that complex. So I could be wrong. I'm learning.
Yeah, I hear you. It's difficult. Cultural change happens at a very, very glacial speed. Is that glacial means fast or slow? Whatever it is, slow.
Well, climate scientists would say it's fast now. Glacial.
Yeah, climate change has speeded it up. But
Matter of
just
perspective.
understanding that conflict is about people, and it's normal in every relationship. Conflict is to be expected and can be a stimulus for transformation to something better, can help people kind of intellectually connect with it differently. And I think there was a question, John, or comment?
It's okay to make a comment?
Like, for sure.
Yeah, well, one of the things I wrote down here was sitting in your discomfort, which caused me discomfort. But it kind of reminded me of Buddhism, and you kind of saw the intersection of philosophy and religion and peace building and things like that. but I think that is such an art, because I think there's a tendency to kind of run and not relax in your discomfort. And I thought that was very powerful in the presentation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question. I thought it was really interesting how you start the role playing by asking the participant questions. And I'm wondering what the purpose is. Is the purpose to like develop the character, or is the purpose to get the audience to care about that person and their perspective?
Both of those things. I mean, it's meta information that the other player could potentially use in the scene. Not as in like I'm cheating, but more like, you know, well, you're just
Context.
sitting around partying all the time, and that's why you're not turning things in, when that's clearly not the case for this other character, right? You could use that information to push the scene. But also it's to try to get people to feel that emotion as quickly as possible. So there's all the sort of surface reasons or like details about the scenario. And we get into this with conflict, right? We can get into the little micro details about the conflict. Well, you said this and then I said this, but actually, if we can drop deeper into what might be upsetting that person, maybe from their past, or what are they bringing into this story? It's surprising how quickly people can go there and just generate content sometimes, which may be from their own personal experience or maybe them imagining someone else's experience. So hopefully it helps them start to take that perspective so that they can enter the scene.
I have a comment / question. Maybe it's more of a question. You know, in some of the courses that I teach, I do some role playing activities. I have this like strange, I don't know. I find it really difficult to clearly and succinctly frame a role play, right? Does that make sense? And so I'm curious, like, if ACC has a template or a you know list of or some type of resource that others could use or draw from for these very simple role plays, but that would help in other classes and training type settings. So that's my question.
I mean, it is a challenge to come up with a conflict scenario that's succinct, but also gives people enough to actually get in conflict. Our resources, Sarah.
Well, I was just thinking we have the LARP scripts for these different exercises, and if you'd be open to it, we could share them so they could see how it's framed in terms of for the facilitator too, not just for the audience.
Say that again, Sarah. We have the
LARP scripts that we were using. So
yeah, those are our own
chat
scripts, but yeah, we created them. Right. So and I'm happy to share that for sure. Yes.
But you know,
Leila, you were gonna say something. No. Okay. Yeah, we want to share all of our resources. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in. I'm sorry. I wanted to give everybody kind of a 5-minute transition. It's about 1:10, and we're going to introduce Paul Loeb at 1:15. So you're welcome to put more comments in the chat. Reach out to Layla, Sarah, or Sharon individually. Round of applause. This was really great. As someone who just lives and dies experiential learning, I'm always learning something else. And I really appreciated this. And we're going to have another conversation one-on-one with Sarah and Layla and Sharon from the standpoint of the work that I'm doing with the Forage Center and things of how we can improve our own experiential learning. So I thank you all for being here. So I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes if they want to kind of check out, but please check back in at 1:15. This is not, we got one more presentation actually, and I think Paul's going to talk about voting and the voting guide project that he's part of, and yeah, it's not, I'm gonna say it's the elephant in the room. We got a big election coming up around across the US in a couple of weeks. Some of you probably already voted. I already voted. But early voting is happening all across the country. So come back in 5 minutes and then we're going to shift our conversation a bit. But thank you again for my colleagues at Austin Community College.
Thank you.
All right, see you all in 5 minutes. Hey, Paul, let's say
Hey, how you doing?
good, good, good. Thanks for being here.
Sure, it's an insane time, so it's just and I'm wondering, can I get and I'm not that adept at the sharing and how to share, but can I get sharing privileges so I can
Yep,
basically
you already have sharing privileges.
Oh, okay, great.
If you go down, you should be able, it says multiple participants can share simultaneously.
Oh, okay,
You should be
great.
able to do that.
So okay, let me
That
just
should
see how
not
to
be a
do that.
problem.
Maybe I'll
Play
just
around
test
with
it
it.
out with a
Yeah.
background right now. Okay, here, go back to here, and here we are, and let's just, where's my screen share? Share screen, okay, great. So if I share my screen, I'm just gonna, this is me being technically,
I know the
here we
feeling.
are. Okay, great. Now I'm
There,
sharing my
it's
screen.
shared.
Okay, great.
I mean, there's nothing there. Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now here it is, and that's yeah. I think that's okay. Great, and then I'll just move over to the other screens. That's a good background drop anyway.
Okay,
Does that
that's
work?
fine. Yeah, that's fine. Just keep it up if you want to keep it up.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Then I'll just move to a couple other ones afterwards, like a individual guide or a Spanish guide or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a busy man right now, I guess.
Oh, it's totally insane. I mean, like literally, there was the old Warren Zevon song, I'll sleep when I'm dead, but that's sort of what it feels like.
Well,
It's,
I was talking to a colleague the other day and we were going to meet. She says, "Oh no, I'm too busy with GOTV right now. You
yeah,
can't talk to me for 3 weeks." I said, "Okay, all
yeah,
right."
no, it really is that way. I mean, it's like, partly because this is sort of, as an independent project, it's a startup, even though the guides have been going for 10 years. So there was just all this stuff to do and, stuff we hadn't thought about. And
Well, I was been following Georgia, and they're saying the Georgia early voting is like hitting all the records, right?
yeah, yeah, it's
Years ago.
huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, is this what we're going to see across the country, or I don't know?
Don't know. I mean, it's sort of like, it's the efforts of all the people who are trying to get people out. It's
Yeah.
challenges with voting laws. It's cynicism. I mean, everything's intersecting in a big mush, and who knows?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we every vote counts, especially you keep thinking about so many elections are at the slice of a knife, kind
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
we're gonna
No,
have a lot of these elections again this year where 500 votes here or there makes a difference, right?
oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So we all have to be in it. So
Yeah. Actually, I have a story about that. Maybe I'll repeat that when we get back on, because it's a very personal story about getting 1/50th of the margin in my entire state.
Oh, right.
About 20,
All right.
18 years ago. So
All right, it's 1:15, so I'm going to ask everybody to rejoin us if they can. So if I could see a few more headshots, that would be great. Okay, fantastic. So welcome everybody back. This is the second session of our 2-part session today. Just to remind you all, when we finish today, we will be back at noon tomorrow and have 2 sessions. The way we work this seminar is Thursday, Friday for 3 consecutive weeks, and that doesn't allow it to take your whole day, but allows you to get to learn something. The elephant in the room, or whatever we want to call it, is we've got a major midterm election. I say major midterm because midterms were never thought of as major, but this is not like any other period of time when it comes to voting. And I've known Paul Loeb, run paths with him over the years. A lot of you know Paul probably from his book, Soul of a Citizen, Living with Conviction, Challenging Times, and the Impossible Will Take a Little While. So that may be where you're familiar with him. Either you've read those books as a student, use them with your students, I don't know. He's lectured over the US and has talked at a number of associations that just kind of too numerous, like the NAA, the American Society of Aging, Points of Life. There's a large list of places where he's talked. In 2008, he formed and coordinated the National Election Engagement Project, a nonpartisan effort that helps colleges and universities engage their students with election. And of course, most recently now, he's been working, and I think this is an evolution from that, in Guides.vote, an effort to raise voting participation in US elections. So I want to give Paul time to talk about his efforts, to talk about the importance of voting. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul. We'll go again to about 2 o'clock. If there are questions after that, we can take, and unless Paul, as he's going through it, makes no difference. So Paul,
Sure.
thank you for being here.
Oh yeah, glad to do that. I mean, David does really good work, and I was like, well, I hope things will slow down by now. By this point, answer no, they're actually more intense than ever. And up till 11:30, sending emails about how our guides could intersect the Ohio debate that's on what is it? I think it's on Tuesday, and it's just the way it is. So let me give you a little bit of history and a little bit of context on why I'm spending my time doing this instead of going back to writing books, which was my original plan. As we were talking just over the break, elections are often really close. I just have a story, I think actually I put it in Soul of a Citizen in one of its versions, where in 2004, I was knocking on doors. I live in Seattle, and I just volunteered for the governor's campaign that I supported, and I knocked on a bunch of doors in a neighborhood they assigned me to, and I got 3 people to vote. One had forgotten it was election day, one needed a ride to the polls, and one had an absentee ballot and didn't know, if they could still turn it in. So totally routine stuff that anybody would have had the same response. And then it turned out that there was a 134 vote election, and my candidate won after multiple recounts. And the Secretary of State who supervised this was now on our advisory board, and basically, it was a reminder just of how close it could be, because I literally got 1/50th of the vote in one afternoon of volunteering. So, that's an element that you really want to encourage all your students to participate in, because they really could make the difference. That's a segue to, as described, I then founded in 2008 as a pilot, and then really launched for good in 2012, something called Campus Election Engagement Project that worked with schools institutionally to get students to vote. And by the time I left, we had about 600 campuses. And since then, I've now spun off the nonpartisan candidate guides of ours that were the school's favorite resource, and to make them a separate project. And the genesis of the guides was, it was 2012 when we relaunched, and the school said to us, can you do some kinds of guides to give our students a sense of where the candidates stand, because they just don't know, and that would be really helpful. And I said, well, doesn't the League of Women Voters do that? And they said, well, yeah, but they're just longer than our students are going to read. So they don't read them. So we want something really short, really concise, and that they can just skim in a few minutes, and they can end up basically, they can take a look at it and decide who to vote for. And we ended up, this is what should I call it? This is format version 5.0, because it's gotten honed and more sophisticated every time. But essentially, what we ended up doing is we ended up with a format. I'll show you the PDF first, where we just went right down the list. And here are the issues in alphabetical order. Here are the candidates in alphabetical order. And here's where they stand. And initially, we started out just kind of with, okay, yes, no, agree, disagree. And then, each round we would get feedback, and the schools, what was interesting to me is what the school said is, we originally envisioned this as a tool. So the student is in the ballot, in the voting booth, and they're basically deciding, who to vote for. And they said, well, it still certainly serves that purpose, But what's actually more interesting is that it actually gets students past a barrier. And the barrier is, I don't know enough to vote. And so I'm going to stay home. And so that not only does it help them decide, but it actually directly increases participation. And this came, actually, I just coincidentally, I'm showing a Wisconsin guide, but this actually came home to me. I guess it was actually the year after we began the project. It was 2013. And I was speaking, I made my living speaking at colleges over the last 30 years. And I was speaking at 2 schools back to back, and one of them was in Minnesota. And they gave me, I guess it was a math class to talk to. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because the last math I had was high school geometry and I wasn't very good at it. And so therefore I have no idea what to say. So I'll just ask them the only thing I could think of, which is, did you vote? No, most of them didn't. Well, why not? Minnesota, you may know, has some of the what I would call most voter-friendly laws in the country, election day registration, and it's easy to to prove who you are. And so it wasn't any practical barriers. And what they said is, everybody's lying. Everybody's spinning. You just can't trust what they're saying. Everybody's got handlers. And I don't want to vote for the wrong person. I don't want to vote based on a lie. So I'm just staying home. And everybody like, yeah. They all agreed. And then somebody said, well, if there just was a list, like a list where you could see where people stood. And then they all said, yeah, that would really, really helpful. And so, they're all jumping in on this. And I said, well, actually, we do that, but we didn't happen to do one for Minnesota, that particular race. We were kind of just getting started. And so it was an interesting hypothetical saying, I didn't vote, but if I had had these guides, I would have voted. And then the next day I go, 15 miles away or 20 miles away, it wasn't very far, right over the border in Wisconsin. We happened to have a Wisconsin guide because we had been doing one for the Senate race. And I'm plunked into another class. And I had asked the same question. It was actually, I think, a leadership class, but so maybe more engaged. But basically, I think there was one person in the entire class who didn't vote. Every other single person voted. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. What's the secret sauce? Like, we want to bottle this because, like, if this works for you, it's going to work for other people. And that's our goal, is to get everyone to vote. And they said, well, there were these guides. And there was these guides in our campus mailboxes, and so we could look at the guides, we could see where people stood, where we could make up our own decisions, and everyone says, yeah, that would just made it really easy. And I was battling a cold, and I was kind of spacey, and I sort of thought, oh, well, it must be, maybe it was lacrosse, because it was a Catholic school in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Maybe it was lacrosse paper that had done a guide. And they said, prof said, no, Paul, those were your guides. We got you weren't directly working with us, but we're part of Wisconsin Campus Compact, and Campus Wisconsin Compact sent out the guides to all their members. And we looked at them, we thought, geez, these are fantastic. So we just printed 3,500 copies and put them in everybody's mailbox. And so that was a really interesting validation, because it really said, if they've got this information, they're more likely to vote. And there's a lot of, what I would say, justified and necessary attention focused on the mechanisms of voting, because they've become extraordinarily more complex, and in not most, but many states, much more daunting over the last decade. I mean, it is just harder for students to vote. Many people would say deliberately harder, and harder for young voters, harder for trans voters who don't have a stable address, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of effort put into trying to give people the right information, and that's extremely important, because if you don't have the right information, you're going to show up and like, whoops, you don't have the right ID, sorry. However, I would argue that there's an equal necessity for the context of who to vote for, because if people have that response, again, you go back to Minnesota, it was easy to vote. The practicality, they could do it last minute. the practicalities were easy, but they just didn't feel they knew enough to vote, and they didn't trust anybody. And the more ads they saw on some level, the less likely they were to vote. And so this was, you know, it was an interesting confirmation. And then when did it come out? I think it actually came out last spring. It was a Knight Foundation study, and they looked at non-voters, and they particularly looked at 18 to 24-year-olds. And what they found was that they had, you know, various questions why people didn't vote. And 38%, I might be have the number off by 1 point, but 38% said they didn't have enough information about the candidates to vote. 11% said they weren't sure, but they thought they didn't have enough information about the candidates to vote. So basically 49%, half of them didn't have enough information. The non-voters in general, the numbers weren't quite as high, but they were pretty close to that. You know, so that's the, I always, my background is, you know, you look at the story, the exemplary example, because there's an awful lot of truth in that. That's the Wisconsin story, that's the Minnesota story. And then if you've got some quantitative research that parallels it, you see what that says. And in this case, they're really lining up. And what they are saying is, if you give them the information, and this circles back to what the schools were telling us and we did surveys every single election year after the election, and like, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what could be improved, what did you think of this resource, that resource? The guides were always at the top of the list as the favorite resource. And that was where we started hearing, hey, they help people vote, as opposed to just they help people decide who to vote for once they've already decided to vote. So to me, the combination of our surveys, the Knight study, the anecdotal evidence from all the schools that we were working with, it seems really clear that just having these guides available just makes a huge, huge difference. And so then how have the guides themselves evolved, and what's the background process that creates them? So, as you're looking, at the screen, essentially what we've got is, initially we had, as mentioned, just, do you agree, don't you agree? And then we had a whole bunch of notes someplace else, and we sort of thought, well, somebody wants to come to us and say, how'd you get it? Your information, we can show them our notes. As we got more sophisticated and as we got feedback from the schools, it was like, okay, well, why don't we, for every answer that we have, there's probably 5 pages of research behind it. Each guide takes about 50 hours. We've got veteran journalists from, who worked for Time Magazine, AP, LA Times. Serious journalists. And everyone goes through 4 or 5 rounds of vetting because, people catch each other's mistakes. And, we're really looking, for nonpartisanship. Is this fair? Sometimes that's hard to do these days, but we try our best to be super fair and absolutely accurate, and linked to credible sources and not random, either partisan posts or something random somebody said on the internet. And the result is that you can actually, as we've gotten the feedback, what happens is that people essentially go through in a couple of different ways. They can do a very, very quick skim. They can do that, on the PDF. They can do it, on the online version. You can go and you can kind of hop to, hey, you want to see what do gun laws say? Here's what the gun laws say. What about the minimum wage? What about policing? All sorts of different questions, taxes, voting rules, and they can hop around. This is a feature we added. And if they want to see, I'm just going randomly here. I have no idea what it's going to open up, but it's basically going to be, this is a YouTube video where you can actually watch, what Mandela says on this. And then let's just see how to get back to the earlier one. Oh, let's see, sorry about this. I'm trying to get, hold on a second. We've got, the goal was not to give you a Nelson, Mandela Barnes commercial. The goal was to show you a source. So that's a video where, what did he say? This is what he said. They go over to Ron Johnson, we was talking about cutting federal spending. This is an article from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We tend to do, major newspapers major, NPR, PBS, major commercial TV stations. So, credible sources in all cases. And, the goal is, if somebody wants to say, okay, well, here's what they're summing up, but how do they, how do I know whether the person said this? Every single one of these, pro-growth, whatever the pro-growth, and again, I'm just jumping in, this is a campaign website, from his bio. So every single one of these, it basically, we should probably use a Texas example because some of you are from Texas. So we go over to Texas, and here's the Texas governor race, which we also have in Spanish because we translate every state with a large Spanish.
Oh, you're not sharing your screen, or it's not sharing.
Oh, shoot. It's not
still
sharing?
The default, yeah, just to let you know.
Oh, new share. Okay. So new share. Okay, sorry on this. All right. So this is the Spanish version of, of the Texas Governor's Guide, which we have for all the races, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, North Carolina, places, Georgia, that have high Hispanic populations. And then this is, let's go back to here. This is.
It's not sharing still, just to let you know.
Oh dear. Okay.
It's okay.
So let me try again. I'm not a great technology person. Let me just try again with the Texas one. Guys.vote.
You might want to stop sharing what you are sharing and reshare.
Oh, okay. See, this is good. All right. Stop sharing and reshare. All right. Yeah. I have to say technology is probably not my strength. Okay. So now we're going to go to the Texas guide just because, some of you folks are from Texas. And then now I'm going to go back and share it again. Share screen. Okay. And here's the Texas guy. So there we go. Does that work? You can see it now. Okay, great. Okay, and thank you, whoever told me that you had to stop sharing to reshare. See, so you learn something every day. So anyway, again, going back to this is since a bunch of you from Austin, here's the Texas guide. And, some of them, so sometimes we have state specific, most of our questions are standardized. We have a lawyer who vets everything for nonpartisanship and, nonprofit compliance and everything. And, one of the things she said is, the IRS likes it if all the questions are standard. So we have the questions standard, but sometimes, which she said is fine, there will be a very state specific question. So, the energy grid, is the Texas energy grid being improved enough after the 21 failures? Now, obviously, we're not going to have this on our Florida guide or our Arizona guide or our Pennsylvania guide, but for Texas, pretty important. So, here is Greg Abbott saying the laws have made the power grid more stronger than ever. And here's Beto saying, no, it still has a lot to go. And that's because the oil and gas industry has basically set things up to fail. And, here are their policies. So, where we have a very salient state specific, I remember doing this a few years ago, there was a runaway algae bloom in Florida. That was really important to folks. So we put the algae bloom on the, as one of the questions. Virginia, when they were extending the metro rail to the next county, what's your stand on that? That was a governor's race. So we'll do some state specific, but a lot of the questions tend to be general questions that pretty much, everyone and particularly students are interested in. And, one of the nice things previously is we had this sort of feedback loop with students, and now we're starting to kind of rebuild our network of schools and essentially, getting feedback like, yeah, this is what students are interested in. Can you please add this question? And then we also look at, surveys of young voters and just like, which issues come up high on their priority list. So that's basically the core of what we do. And then, the question, I'm going to do the stop sharing and how to basically, let's just see. So this is, and I'm going to stop share and then I'm going to reshare now that this works.
It
Okay.
actually was working seamlessly this time as
Oh.
you were like, clicking links.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, at any rate, so this is just, we have a resource on the site on how to, how to distribute them. This is, one of the things we did, which is not, there's many things that still can be done at this state, but they're mostly electronic or local printing, but we were covering the cost and offering that to our, Danny Campus, where we made a guide to do a big blown up version that you could basically put on a bulletin board or put them on stakes in front of the building. This is actually Middle Tennessee State that they didn't even just, well, they told us afterwards we offered free banners, but instead they basically they used our congressional guide and they put them up on sort of kind of like the political yard signs, but they just sort of stitched them together somehow. And, you had them in front of the student union where everybody comes in and out. And it's kind of like a, I don't know, like an eye level billboard. It was pretty cool. So, so there's a lot of ways to distribute them, primarily at this date, because, we got 12 days for the election. We have a lot of places that do all campus email. If the school has an election website, like we just learned Temple University in Philadelphia, which is huge, they basically have them up on their election website. Social media, we've got, if you go to the guides.vote site, we've got, maybe I'll scroll down there. I'll just do it this way. And then do I need to do the whatchamacallit thing where you,
No.
or can you see it all? Do I need
We can see it. We can see it, Paul.
Okay, great. So what we did is we had a really good place that does graphic images, create these images. This one says, it's a little cut off, but it says, not all politicians are trash. Your voting is your power. The more you vote. And basically, it's a tool where you go there and they've got the, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And, all you have to do from a campus group or campus website is just click the platform you want to share, scroll through the images, and, see which ones you want to share. And these are our Halloween linked images, and then we've also got some state specific images. This is, so there's Florida. They're pretty generic, but they're just kind of like images of the state, and and all the stuff up on the site, is super nonpartisan. Here's Texas, cactus, image of Texas, cowboy boots, and it's all nonpartisan. And the goal is to have something that's a little bit fun that students would respond to. So having, if the schools can share on social, if they can send it by email, get them discussed in classes. We're hoping actually that in the off year, since one of the candidates will have been elected in every race, they can then look at that candidate and say, hey, what did they do? What did they support in office? What did they say they supported? If they wanted to support something, why didn't it happen, or did it happen? Maybe they just got outvoted. A lot of times I think people feel like, students like, hey, he's the president or she's the president, they can do whatever they want. No, not so straightforward. You're a senator. How come my senator didn't make this happen? Well, there's a filibuster and they tried to pass this bill, or they opposed this bill. So in a way, they're also there for voter education. And then we actually have, let me scroll up and find, we also have, and this is sort of for longer, probably not at this point, but we have a guide to disinformation that's basically, it's just a 2-pager that sort of kind of helps people say, all right, is content real? Isn't it real? What's a trusted source? What's a reliable source? So one of the things that we're doing, which is probably more implicit than explicit, is, the guides are an education in media literacy. The sources that they go to are credible sources, because these days there's a proliferation of of sources that aren't. I mean, we kind of lead with a story that this is in 2016 that I think it was the top 20 stories on Facebook about the election, the top 20 fake election stories had more engagement than the 20 best performing stories from major news sites. And 4 of them, of the fake ones that did the best, came from a 24-year-old Romanian man who had never been to the US. So, you know, this is just the world. I mean, and well, it's the world we live in, and I probably would say that today, with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, it's probably at risk of getting one step worse, if we can believe that, because he doesn't want to, you know, he doesn't want to be checking misinformation on site, and that's really terrifying. So the guides are a way of, you know, combating that tangibly, and then also, again, you know, go back to it, of combating the resignation that says, let me just go back to the resignation that says, you know, we don't know enough. There's nothing we can do. You know, I'm just staying home because it's all so confusing. And, you know, you look at it and you're just like, all right, these are lots and lots of issues that are, you know, that are relevant. Now, some of you folks, we don't have, how to describe it, we don't have guides because of limited staffing. We can't do a guide for every race, although we'd like to. So one of the, what we did this year for the house races is we did a general guide. And are you able to see this? Just checking it again that it's working, as opposed to having to stop and start again. You can see it, correct? Yeah. Okay. So there's a general guide, and what we looked at is sort of party line votes in the last, I think it was the last 3 Congresses. So going back from 2018 on, and just, okay, what does it mean to have, you know, given the Congress is, what is it, a 5-vote margin, I think? And I'm thinking of, you know, some of the schools on Long Island, because I think there's a close district, you know, in Long Island. You know, so it's the same issues over here, but it's like, you know, how did people vote when they were in control? How'd the Democrats vote? How'd the Republicans, you know, we've had a couple of Republican Congresses, we've had some Democratic ones, and, you know, so it's effectively the same way of saying, what do they stand for? And we took sort of votes where it was overwhelmingly party line, and just like, okay, this is, you know, this is where they stand on these general issues. It's not as specific as your congressperson, but it's still, I think, more useful than, you know, than not. That this is the one that, because we didn't do any guides for Tennessee, that Middle Tennessee State put up on the, you know, on the signs in front of their student union, because like their students were all going to vote in congressional races. And I don't even remember if they had a governor's guide, but if they did, you know, we just didn't have, you know, the bandwidth to do that. So this is another thing for, well, not just for schools where we didn't do a guide, but you know, but for ones in states, you know, either way, where there might be a close congressional race, and, you know, might be 5 votes. There was one in, it was in Iowa, it was actually the district the University of Iowa was in, and it was a 6-vote race in 2020. Like 6 votes. I mean, my God, you know, if that isn't an incentive for students to, you know, to vote, I don't know what is. So why don't I open it up now and just, you know, whatever questions you folks have.
I'm going to take a moderator's prerogative. I got this email while we were in, you probably can't read it. Congratulations, your ballot has been counted by a local board of elections. So you get this, right? Then you know you've done your right thing. So Paul, I've got 2 questions. One question is, and I think you answered the question. I was wondering how deep that you go in elections, but you characterize like somebody's voting record.
Mm-hmm.
What if they come back to you and say, you've mischaracterized my voting record? That's not what I said.
Right.
You're distorting me. What do you do about that?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. And some of our partners actually asked about that. I mean, flat out, has anybody challenged your guides? And it's interesting because we've been doing them for 10 years. We started in 2012. And in some, they were, you know, always distributed on campuses, but we also, prior to that, I was doing a lot of writing for Huffington Post. And so Huffington Post would have them, they would basically run all of them. And then the week before the election or whatever it was, they put a front page article linking to them. So they, they got serious visibility in a way that got read by candidates, campaign handlers, and everything. And we never did get that. The most we got are two kinds of things. We got some people saying, who were from third and fourth party candidates, saying, how come you didn't do a guide for the Libertarian, and how come you didn't do a guide for the Green? And so it was like, we got a challenge, because with our format, the schools loved the format where we could basically, hand something out, and it could be, side by side, in the PDF. And if you have multiple candidates, more than, you can do 3, but 4 just is impossible. And we're actually struggling with this. There's a really important Michigan Supreme Court race, but what they did, and I don't even know who did this exactly, who made the decision. Sorry, we've got a blank screen here. I'll just go back to the let's see. Let's see. I'll get back to here again. What they did was, is we said, you know what, if they poll 15% or more, then, okay, here, so here's our 2 form, and you can see that if you added a third column, makes it tough. If you add a 4th, it's just impossible. So we just said, if they get a 15% threshold in the polling, then, then we'll basically do a guide for it. So for example, if you go to Alaska, there is a race where there's 4 candidates. One is a minor party candidate, and I'm not sure why this is being slow. Let me just try it again this way. But essentially, we've got 3 candidates up in Alaska because, there are 3, actually, here it is. And then the PDF, it actually, it's crowded, but if you can see it, but it fits. There's 3 possible candidates, and then there's one more who at the very bottom we say, well, actually they dropped, the 4th candidate dropped out. So, there's 3 candidates, and you can do it. You just have to draw, shorter answers and fewer questions. And in this case, they use ranked choice voting, so we indicate that. But, it is possible. I mean, probably not Chesbro will probably not win, but certainly Murkowski or Shabaka could win, and remote chance that Chesbro could win. So all 3 of them are up there because they're all polling 15% or more. And once we did that, it solved it. And then we just basically at the very bottom of the guide, we say for every, because we don't want to say, hey, the Libertarian is more credible than the I like to drink party, than the Constitution Party, or whatever it happens to be. So we just, everybody who's on the ballot at the bottom gets their website, and we just say, hey, we don't have room to do this for every candidate, but please check out their websites, and here they are. And then once we did that, people were like, oh, okay, well, I'd rather be polling 15%, but that's where, it's a logical and reasonable thing to do. And then the only other, we haven't ever gotten anybody who says you got it wrong. We had one candidate, it was a lieutenant governor's race in Virginia a few years ago. And he said, you have me down as no stand found, which is one of the categories we have because sometimes we just don't have a stand for somebody. And he said that was correct, but I've now made a statement on it. Or I think it was his campaign manager said this, they've now made a statement on it. Here's a statement, and here's what you should say. And we looked at it and it's like, okay, we're not going to say it in the way that you would like us to say it because, we're going to sum up in our language in our way, and we're not going to, spin it. But, now it's a legit stand. We'll just update the guide. But we've literally, other than that, we have not gotten anybody saying you got it wrong. And I think honestly, it's just because of the rigor of our vetting process.
One of the questions you don't have up there, and then I'm going to let other people ask questions, is who's president of the United States, or that question, which is what, what was the election? And that's probably too.
Yeah, we do have it. So let's go to, I'm just trying to think. Let's go to Arizona. So in Arizona under elections, we do have it. And
I-
it says, did Joe Biden legitimately win the 2020 presidential election? And so what we decided, and there's a very contrasting stand. You know, yes, the objections were baseless. No, it was a rotten mess. If it was free and fair, President Trump would be sitting in the Oval Office today, and America would be so much better off. So what we decided to do, and we, as you could probably imagine, there was a lot of discussion on this. There was discussion in our internal team. We then talked about it with the lawyer, and and we decided that basically, if one of the candidates said that it was not legitimate, we would add it. But if both of them said the candidate said it was legitimate, we wouldn't have it just because they were on the same page and space is scarce. So that was our logic. So we've got, what do we have? We probably have 15 guides where that's a question, and we probably have 30 guides where it isn't. I'm not quite sure. It might even be a 50-50 ratio. But wherever somebody raised questions, even if they were sort of ambivalent, and some of them said at one point it was a fair election, and they said no, it wasn't. One of the things we've done, and again, this is partly in consultation with lawyers, if somebody changed their stand, because that happened. It happened a fair amount with the abortion stuff, where they kind of walked it back. I'm not sure if this was, yeah, okay. So this is an example. In a 2022 questionnaire, he said he's 100% pro-life and supports abortion bans with no exceptions. More lately called Arizona's ban with the exception for life of the mother reasonable. So at that point, if somebody's kind of trying to have it both ways, or maybe they changed their mind, I don't know. But we put both in, and we just sort of give an indication, because there's a lot of people, and this happens to some extent on both sides, where they would just like, hey, I can say this in the primary, and then suddenly it disappears from the website. So it's a kind of accountability, but it's an accountability that doesn't take a side. It just says, here it is. Here's what they said at one point. Here's what they said at another point. And certainly there's also issues where, something like marijuana is an example where, the positions just shift over time. And
that's marijuana's on the ballot in Maryland, for instance. It's a big issue in Maryland.
Yeah. And so, if somebody 10 years ago said, no, I don't believe in legalizing marijuana, we do want to check and see, well, what did they say now? Because, public sentiment has shifted.
So other questions. Just open your mic. I've been monopolizing the questions.
Yeah.
This is Thomas. I'm just curious, in the beginning, how did you, and I'm probably have a hard time phrasing this, but how did you develop the trust in higher education to want to implement this? Because my experience is that particularly when you talk about politics,
right,
that's like a taboo, or people
right,
go crazy, frantic. So and don't take this wrong, as an outsider,
sure,
to campuses, what was your process or strategy? I'm curious because
yeah. No, it's a good question. And that's sort of more about the previous organization, but what I would say was twofold. One is, it just so happened that because of the books of mine getting out, Soul of a Citizen and The Impossible Take a Little While, they got out, between them, I think there was 300,000 in print, and probably 3/4 of that was on campuses. So they're really, really, really being widely used. And so people knew me. They'd been bringing me in to speak. They've been bringing me into conferences. And so in some cases, it would be like, just, hey, well, this is Paul's organization. We know his books. We know that they're, they're good and credible. We'll look at this. We worked a lot through Campus Compact, which had relationships. It was larger at that point than it is today. So it had relationships in most of the states. And there was a huge Texas Campus Compact. I think it had 70 members or something like that. And, so we would go in partnering with them. They already had the trusted relationship. And so in a sense, they would be, how to describe, my background is political organizing and community organizing. And so it's your classic relationship-based organizing, which is you go in through somebody who has a trusted relationship. So in this case, Campus Compact had the trusted relationships. I had the trusted relationship with some of the national associations like NASPA, the student affairs folks, and we would just go in through them. Like the president of NASPA said, or executive director said, use our name. Every school has a dean of students, activities, just use our name. use my name and say, Kevin suggested it. So we would go in using the names of the people from the organizations they trusted. And then that would kind of get us in the door. And then we kind of improvised the examples just from things that we could, the first year or so, these are just ideas that we had. And then by, second or third year, it was coming from the schools, and it was just like, hey, here's something a school did. You could do this too. Oh yeah, another school did this. Here's a third school, they did that. So, and in the sense of how the guides are distributed, if you go to the resource that's on our partners page, that's how to distribute the guides on campus, where all of those things came from. Most of them weren't things we thought of. They're just things that schools thought of and did. And like, hey, how about blowing it up as a banner and putting in front of a student union on posts? We'd never thought of that, but it's a great banners cost $25 or $30. And any school can do that. And you can get, a big school, you can get 20,000 people seeing that $30 banner. So that came from the schools. And so again, it was relationships of trust, and then the ideas and examples came from the specific, schools that were using stuff.
How about one more question for Paul, and then we'll
Sure.
wrap up a bit. Any more questions? Go ahead, Tulin. Open your mic.
I have a general question about education, because as I listen to the news and read the newspaper, and I see that on the Republican side, most of the people who win the elections are election deniers. So I wonder if, as educators, we have failed to educate our students to approach matters critically. Are our students able to critically evaluate what they read or what they hear on the news?
I think that's the challenge. In some level, it's a perennial challenge, but I think it gets more acute. It gets more acute in the world of, with the social media world we have. We have some great TikToks. I'll just click to the page where, it's, that basically if you put guides.vote and into TikTok, we had these people do these different, a couple of them in Spanish, mostly in English, about the guides. They're mostly kind of humorous because that's what travels on TikTok. And, but at the same time, there was a Washington Post piece the other day about TikTok and disinformation and, all sorts of things being spread that just are not true. And so, when I look at that, that is the context that we have. And I think that's why, in some ways, something like our guides, it really kind of underscores their value because, go back to disinformation, you can abstractly say, here's how to spot false content, and we do, and that's very important. But students these days, they're working, they're stretched, they're in debt, they're, even after, some of the debt cancellation, it's not easy. So to say, hey, just go research and make sure it's trustworthy, a bunch of them are going to say like, yeah, well, that's great in theory. So I think the challenge is for us to, teach them how to read critically, but also, use resources like our guides, even if it's not the election season, to say, all right, well, what did they stand for? What did they actually say? And to get them into the reality and not into the, manufactured reality. I think that's it's not a perfect answer, because probably wouldn't be in the situation we're in if it was a perfect answer, but it's probably the best we can come up with is just, get them, it doesn't mean they're going to agree with us necessarily. It just means that we get them to think about the reality and then decide what their role is as a citizen in, speaking out about it and voting and in, deciding who's going to be running their states and our country and their cities.
Well, thanks, Paul. This is great. And I know Paul has put his information in the chat and how to access the guides. I know Sarah already sent it to her Texas students, even though
Oh, great. Fantastic.
That's
Yeah.
great. Voting is we're in the midst of voting right now. And in many states you can still register to vote, right? I think, right? Even late registration.
Yeah, a lot of them still can. Some of it's cut off and a lot can't. And even if they can't, then they're still going to be going to school. A lot of people who have registered and they have friends and family. One of the reasons we did the Spanish guide, just as a sort of, we're talking Josh Young's at Miami-Dade, his college is one of our big partners. And, he had just said, our students, most of them speak English as their primary language, but their cousins, their uncles, their aunts, their friends, not all of them do. So give us these guides in Spanish too. So we did,
I'm looking for the day when we have automatic registration when you get a certain age.
Yeah,
You
well,
automatically
there's
get
countries who do that,
I mean, I don't, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that in this
Yeah,
country.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Okay, if you've got any more questions for Paul gave us his contact information. So you can
Yeah.
reach out.
Yeah, just know that I'm super swat,
Oh.
in 3 weeks I'll be, things will slow down significantly. But for now, what I would say is, and I'll probably try and send, just trying to think, if I can get the list, I'll send out. I mean, it's our summary of last minute things to do.
I'll give you the list of everybody who's in this program this year.
Yeah, that would be good. And I'll
good.
just send out our last, if you
I'll
can
get
do that today, even, I'll just send out, it's all just a bullet point here, email it out campus wide if you can, whoever has the biggest reach, student government, administrators, do the sign, it's too late for us to ship the signs, but it's not too late for your local Kinkos to make a sign, make them into a sign.
Right, exactly. I think that's a great idea.
Which is it's kind of my favorite of all of them. Student paper could still do something. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that they can still get out. We love our social media images. We put a lot of money into creating top quality ones, and they're fun. So, just pick one that the school likes and circulate it. Same with the TikToks. So
What if you could get those banners put in front of polling places, right?
well, I think they would have, there's laws on how distant. We actually had the lawyer had a conversation with us about if you had an on-campus polling place, and we have language in there that says, check the laws, about how distant it has to be. But yeah, we actually have places that are set, I can't remember, it was in Arizona, where they said, yeah, there's a place that all our students, I think it's University of Arizona, they all walk to the campus polling station. We're just going to put them up along the way on the, where they walk.
That's great. That's
but
great.
but the real goal is to get it out earlier, because
Yes,
then they decide to vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Paul.
Bye.
Thank everyone. I will see everyone then tomorrow at 12. Try to arrive a little bit before 12 if you can. And this is being recorded, so I'll let you know when this is posted. Tomorrow, Ty Olson will be presenting, talking about reflective practice. So thank you, Ty. And then Heather Payne and Nanette Irabarata they're two colleagues in the Forage Center. They both went to community college. They both are doing fantastic work. So they're going to talk about their pathways from community college to the work that they're doing now. Nanette is in Maine, and Heather is in Colorado. So any last things before I call today? Anybody want to add anything? Okay. Thank you all, and I will see you all tomorrow. And thanks for being here. Okay. See you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.